This is going to be the installation instruction video for my newest wireless remote control for the EU2000i Honda generator. If you're familiar with my products, you know about my first wireless remote control for the Honda EU2000i. I'm not going to start it because this room is fairly small, but I'll just crank the starter over. My original kit would allow you to start it, stop it, toggle it in and out of economy mode, and turn one of the outlets on and off by remote control. And it would simply be button number 1. And like I say, I don't want to start it because the room's small. Would crank the starter over and operate the electric choke. Button number 2 would kill the engine. Button number 3 would toggle it in and out of economy mode. Button number 4 would shut this outlet off or back on again in case you had a device that you wish was able to be controlled by wireless remote control, but it wasn't. My newest kit here uses the same radio as that one does, so it is a 4-function, 4-channel remote. Button number 1 is not going to be used right now. It is my hope that American Honda will start producing my electric start for that generator as an option on the generator. We'll see if that happens. If they do, you're going to be all set if you use this radio. At any rate, button number 1 at this time is not going to be used. Button number 2 is the same as that one. We'll shut the generator off. Button number 3 will toggle it into economy mode or back into standard run mode. Button number 4 will shut the outlet off or turn the outlet back on. So the way this one works at this time would be you would start the generator by the normal method, recoil start and manual choke. Then by wireless remote control, if you were in your tent or camping or something and you wanted to toggle it into economy mode or throttle it up to full throttle mode in order to pull a heavier load, you'd use button number 3. And if you had a device that you wanted to shut off or turn back on separately, you'd plug it in to the number 2 outlet and use button number 4. However, if Honda chooses to put my electric start into full production, then you will be able to hook the electric start to my remote control and control everything. Right now, my current version with the electric start is prohibitively expensive, and this is simply an attempt to reduce the cost severely because I can produce the radios at an affordable cost. And if Honda decides to put my electric starter into full production with their resources, they can cut the cost on that severely. At any rate, that's my goal. Okay, the first step is going to be to remove the cabinet. The first step to removing the cabinet is obviously to remove the maintenance cover. That comes off with a simple number 3 Phillips head screwdriver. Remove the back cover. That's held on with 4 Phillips head screws. And they are number 3 Phillips head also. These Phillips head screws have a shoulder on them. So they're a 6mm threaded portion, and then they have a shoulder before they get to the head of the screw. When you pull the cover off, just look real quickly to make sure that the rubber gasket is still in place. I'm going to remove the 4 screws that hold the electrical panel before I take the front cover off completely. The screws that hold the electrical panel on are self-tapping screws, and they're a number 2 Phillips head. And as you can see, the electrical panel will now come out. I'm not going to pull it out right now because there's not a need for it. The front cover is held on with 4 number 3 Phillips head screws, identical to the ones that held the back cover on. They have the shoulder on them. This cover, just simply slide it out a little bit. It's got the wiring from the inverter attached to it, so it won't come all the way out. Then we're going to pull this cover off the side. So I'm just going to slide the front cover out a little bit. The bottom panel, just hook your fingers under it and pull out slightly, and then it slides straight down. You'll notice there are no holes in the bottom of this cover. The opposite side over here has 2 holes in the bottom of it for the float bowl drain and a float bowl vent. We do not need to remove this cover, but if it does fall off, remember that the one with the holes goes on this side, the one without holes goes on the back side. There are 2 Phillips head screws. These are number 3 Phillips heads that go into the handle. And these screws do not have shoulders on them. They're just a straight 6mm Phillips head screw with a flat washer. And in the bottom, there are 2 6mm bolts with 10mm heads. Very long 6mm bolts with 10mm heads. About 6 by 150 millimeters long with 10mm heads on them. Now this side cover should slide out. Just gently slide it away from the grommets and it lifts off. Here is a support bracket that's used to support the fuel tank. The bottom of this is held in place by another bolt or screw identical to the ones that held the front and rear cover on. There's a 6mm screw with a number 3 Phillips head in them and a shoulder on them. fuel tank support bracket now just unsnaps. You'll notice that there's a notch with a rubber grommet around it that this tab from the fuel tank slides into. That supports it. So now that the fuel or the cabinet is removed, we can start the installation of the radio package. Okay, take the kit out of the box and lay the radio and wiring harness components out. Incidentally, you'll have two strips of Velcro that are going to be used to mount the radio and the voltage regulator. But this will be referred to as the radio module during the instructions. This is the voltage regulator. If you've read your owner's manual, you'll see where it tells you that the 12-volt battery charger or the plug on the front of the generator is unregulated. That's an understatement. It can range anywhere from 9 volts to 18 volts depending on the RPM. And in order to charge the battery, we have to be able to regulate it, because if it's too high, it'll burn the acid right out of the battery, and if it's too low, the battery goes dead. I've got these regulators set up right now to where they charge the battery at 11.4 volts. That way they are slightly undercharged. What that'll do is give a greater lifespan to the battery. We don't need a full 12 volts. In fact, this radio will operate just fine anything above 10.2 volts. And the only time the battery is necessary is during the shutdown mode, and it has to maintain at least 10.2 volts for about 5 seconds. Unfortunately, it does require the use of a rather intense voltage regulator to be able to control that. So once you get the whole thing laid out, and lay it out in a manner like this, the relay down here, the voltage regulator, this wiring pigtail with the kill wires and the power leads for the battery going up in this direction. Take your two sections of Velcro. One will be used to mount the radio, the other will be used to mount the voltage regulator. Right in this area, which is in front of the inverter module and right behind the flange on the front cover panel, right here is where the radio is going to go. The voltage regulator is going to go to the back of the inverter. So I'm going to peel the adhesive strip off of the first section of Velcro. At least I think I am. And that is going to stick right to the front cover. It's not critical that the Velcro be lined up absolutely perfectly. The radio module actually fits in here so snug that it's entirely possible that you could do this without any Velcro. The piece of Velcro that's going to stick the voltage regulator to the back of the inverter module, take a pair of scissors and cut in from the corner about 3/4 of an inch. What that's going to do is when we stick the Velcro on, I can wrap it around the side and then over the top slightly, and that way the corner will radius around. So again, attempt to remove the adhesive back. what I do is, there's a casting mark on the side of the inverter module. Start the Velcro just shy of the casting mark, then wrap it around the back, and wrap the top over. So that your Velcro will sit on like this. If one of the sheets of Velcro is slightly larger than the other, put the larger one on the back of the inverter. That way you've got more hanging over. Because like I say, the one that goes to the radio, you could just about do it without any Velcro. And you're about to see why. Take the entire system. The antenna has a magnetic base to it. There's a couple of ways that you can slide the radio in place. You can either use one of the protective covers and the adhesive backing on the Velcro, or use a business card. But at any rate, in order to keep the Velcro from latching itself together, put something over the Velcro. What I do is I slide the radio down from the top. And once I get the radio positioned where I want, I pull the protection, in this case a business card, out from between the two halves of the Velcro, at which point it'll lock together. Because otherwise the Velcro will fight you. And I put the radio in first, because it is the trickiest. Okay, so now the radio is where I want it to end up. I slide the business card out. And now, that radio is just about not going anywhere. Then, take the voltage regulator and fold it around like this, because it's going to stick to the back side of the inverter module. And I want it low enough so that it will clear the fuel tank. So the bottom, if you want to, take these wires, which will be the red and the black with the battery terminals on them, and the kill wire. Feed it through right in front of the recoil start, below the start rope, and just have it hanging out this door. So you've got both the battery leads and the kill wire hanging out this door. And now stick the voltage regulator to the back of the inverter module. And with the front panel in place, you'll see that that just barely clears the bottom of the fuel tank. Don't press the voltage regulator all the way into place. Just place it lightly there, because you may need to do some adjusting later on. It's probably as good a place as any to take a break. Okay, the next step is going to be to take this group of wires that is tied off separately, and it consists of the on-off switch for the radio, the two yellow leads control the economy mode of the generator, the red and black that have no connectors on them are going to hook to the 12-volt output, and the heavy red and blue are going to be used to control the outlet on and off. First thing we're going to need to do is, if you look in behind the electrical panel, you'll see that there's one screw with a green wire. Excuse me, one bolt with a green wire. That bolt, ironically, is going to not need to be touched. There are 3 additional bolts. The one that's below the green wire will need to be loosened up considerably. Now, I don't recommend taking it all the way off, because then you've got to restart that bolt. And then the next one over, which lines up under the O on the word Honda, loosen this one up. Don't take it all the way out either. The whole purpose is that we want to be able to flex just enough. If you come over here and you see the gap between the front cover and the inverter module, we just want to flex it out enough so that this switch can fit through this gap. And we're going to go to this side of the lug where that green bolt, or excuse me, where the green wire was attached to the bolt. I'm going to start by feeding the switch through first. The reason I put the switch in first is because that is the largest item that has to fit through that gap. And if there's nothing else in the gap, it makes life easier. So undo the outer nut, and there are 2 washers. You can leave the inner nut in place and see if you've loosened up that end bolt just enough to feed this through. And in my case, I have not yet. Okay, so now I have the on-off switch for the radio module fed through. Next, I'm going to take the large red and blue wire, and again, because those are the next largest item that have to fit through this gap. And I'll feed those through one at a time, simply because it is easier that way. Okay. And now I'm going to do the 2 yellow wires for the economy mode. And the reason being, the wires for the economy mode have plugs on the end of those. We're going to take those through one at a time also. Okay. Then very last will be the red and the black wire that have no connectors on them. And now that we've got all the wires started, I'm going to lay this and feed as much of the wires through as I can. I'm just straightening out the wires to where they flow through nice and smooth instead of having a tangle right where they go through at. Okay. all the wires are fitting through smoothly. Now we go back and we tighten down the 2 bolts that we loosened up. Just gently snug down the 2 bolts that we loosened up earlier. That should be as good a place to take a break as. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is put just one of the front cover mounting bolts in place. And this is simply to make it easier to line everything up. You'll need to lift the fuel tank up so that the grommet around the fuel tank goes around the front cover. Incidentally, the front cover has a foam gasket that on this one is creeping out. You just need to tuck that foam gasket into place. There's a little groove where the foam front cover gasket goes. This is just a little bit tricky, but trust me, it's easier to do it this way than the alternatives. When you get the front cover lined up where it's supposed to go, put just this bottom screw in place. You'll notice that I have not pressed the voltage regulator up tight against the Velcro yet. It's just kind of hanging in there for now. And when we put the brace on the fuel tank, we'll put it into its final position. And that'll be based on how much play we have in the wires. We're coming around to the front of it now. You notice on the eco switch, there are 2 wires that are plugged onto the back. Take the wire that is to your right and remove it. The one that's to your right will allow you a little bit more free play to work in. Truth be known, it will function the same no matter which wire you intercept. But I'm going to intercept the wire that is to the right-hand side. So the first step is to unplug the wire on the back of the switch and cut the connector off of it. We just cut the wire connector off, and now, as you can see, the plug that's to the left still has the factory wire on it. The one that's to the right is unplugged. You have 2 yellow wires. One has a splice connector and one has a 187 spade connector on it. The one with the .187 spade connector we plug to the back of the switch. The one with the splice connector we connect to the original wire that used to connect to the back of the switch. And things get a little tight behind this cover. Tug on it and we got a good connection. Okay, I'm going to lay these wires out of the way just a little bit. Now if you look at the front of the cover, the top light is the oil alert light. And just to the right of the words oil alert, if you'll notice when you look back in here, you'll have to go far enough to the right that you don't interfere with the bracket. So the easiest way to do this is look at the bracket where the oil alert goes. Then you've got the parallel ports. So just to the right of this parallel port, you see that there's an empty area right down here. About the only place behind this cover that doesn't have some kind of a device. So if you look at the front of it, just to the right of this parallel port and down even with the word oil on the oil alert is where we're going to want to drill the hole to mount our switch. Drill a 3/16 inch hole. Let's take a break while I answer this phone. Okay, what I'm going to do is, because sighting it down here, there is more room if I go right to the line between the silver and the black, and even with the word oil on oil alert. And I'm going to mark it at that location to drill my 3/16 hole. Be sure and let your finger off the drill so you don't drill a hole in your finger that you've got behind it holding a panel. Now what I want to do is just clean the burrs off the hole. You can either use a burring tool or a repairman's reamer, or in a pinch, use a flat blade screwdriver if you had. Okay, I've got all the metal burrs off now. What's left is just plastic from this decal that's on the front. If you look at the switch, you'll see that there's a tiny groove. Where's that at? There it is. A tiny groove cut into the threaded portion. And that groove, you look at the large flat washer that used to go on it, has a tab that faces in, and it's right even with the tab on the outside. That groove needs to face up. With that groove facing up, when you flip the switch in the up position, it'll be on, and in the down position, it'll be off. If you accidentally mount this switch upside down, then down is on and up is off. But we're going to put the back nut, thread it all the way in against the switch. We will not be using this index washer, but we'll be using the friction washer. So now we're going to take the switch and feed it into the hole from the back. I'm going to remove the little boot from the switch toggle. Okay, we got a little bit of burr on that hole still. Just making sure that the switch is in right side up again. Okay. That wasp is creeping me out. Okay, I'm going to fit the nut onto the switch. You know, in order to get this switch to screw way down onto it, I'm going to remove the backup nut, which sets the depth in the panel. Because if you do have any burrs on the inside, if you don't have a burring tool, it'll give you more thread to engage. If you do have a burring tool and the patience to deburr everything, then that would not be a factor for you. These threads are very fine. You probably don't want to put a lot of torque on these. Okay, notice that the notch in the top of the switch is facing upward, and you notice there is enough thread that if you got everything deburred, you can put this nut behind it so that the threaded portion sits perfectly flush with the front of the panel. But as I think about this, I realize that there is no problem with allowing a little bit of thread to stick out the front of the panel. It would certainly do you no harm. Then you can slide the little red boot back over the end of the switch. Down is off and up is on. Okay, it's probably a good place to take a break while I get rid of this wasp. Okay, the next step, if you look at the front panel, you'll see there is the 12 volt DC battery charging plug. And that's the one that I referred to earlier, that it is an unregulated output, and that's why we need the regulator. At any rate, there are two wires going to the back of this. There's a white with a red tracer and a black. Going to my voltage regulator, there is a black and a red. This black will go to the black, and the red will go to the white with a red tracer. Now if you come over here, because most people are not comfortable soldering in such close quarter conditions, I'm sending posi taps with the kit. This is a posi tap, and here's how it works. This is what I will refer to as the large end in the explanation later, and this is what I will refer to as the small end in the explanation later. So you'll take the large end and hook it over the wire that you're tapping into, and we'll say that this is your red with a white or white with a red tracer. So you will hook the posi tap over the wire. Then the center portion, as you can clearly see, has a surface piercing probe. Tighten it down onto the wire. So these two are now locked together. And this would represent the red wire coming from my radio. Slide the small end of the posi tap over it. Make sure there's approximately 1/4 inch of bare conductor sticking out. Slide this down as far as you can get it. Usually you will see the insulation on the red wire disappear inside the posi tap. Then thread the small section down, and at that point it should be locked in good. And that's how a posi tap works. They are completely reusable because they are a threaded connector. So if you make an error, like when you pull on it, you can simply cut a fresh end and try again. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a posi tap onto the white wire with a red tracer. And we're in such close quarters in here that we won't be able to video this very well. That's why I wanted to take a moment to show what a posi tap is and how it works. So the first one I'm going to do is going to be the white wire with a red tracer. Some of the newer units have a piece of black electrical tape taping the white wire with a red tracer to the solid black wire. If so, simply remove that piece of electrical tape so you can separate the two wires, so you can put the posi taps into place. because of the close quarters, it's going to require some patience to get back in there. So there, the red wire with the white tracer is connected to the solid red. And now, connect the black and black together. Okay, now, as you can see, we've got the black and the black. And that's a good spot to take a break for a moment. Okay. The next step is going to be to hook the heavy red and the heavy blue wire to the outlet in order to be able to turn this outlet on and off. If you'll notice, the outlets, the upper plug is wider side to side than this one. Now the neutral on these outlets is a T shape because these are 20 amp outlets as opposed to 15 amp outlets, which are on a normal house. Come on over here for a moment. You can see better. The outlet that I'm going to demonstrate this on is a standard 15 amp outlet on a house, and you'll see that if it's sitting on its side, the top slot is smaller than the bottom one. Recognize it from your house. Okay. There are two screws that'll be in the top and a jumper right through here. And right now there is power coming into one of the screws, and the jumper connects it so that both outlets are powered up. What we're going to do is we're going to remove the jumper. Now, any home electrician has probably done this thousands of times and can fast forward through this section of the video if they want. But take the jumper, and bend it back and forth a couple of times at both ends, and you can see that the jumper breaks off easily. So now your outlet will look like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to modify the one in the generator. First thing we're going to do is loosen up the brass screw that holds the stock red wire in place. Then we will loosen up the brass screw adjacent to it. I have already broken the jumper off of this one because I did not expect it to be in a position where you could actually videotape it easily. But as you will see, there is no jumper across this area. And this one is just like the one we demonstrated. Originally, it will have a jumper right through here. You'll break that jumper off. With the jumper out of the way, take the red wire from my kit and slide it over the screw that is to your left. Then take the stock wire and put it back on the screw that was to the left, which is the same screw that you just removed it from earlier, and tighten that screw down. I guess actually we can see pretty clearly here. I did not expect to be able to videotape this easily. Then the screw that is to the right, hook the blue wire from my kit to, and go ahead and tighten it down. So that concludes the wiring that goes behind this panel. Now the big challenge is to be able to fold all the wire into a way that it'll fit comfortably behind there. So I'm going to go ahead and get the screws that hold that panel in place. There is a tab at the bottom here that tucks into a slot. There is a green round wire on it. Make sure when you put it in that you tuck that wire into the slot. The heavy wires that go to the relay are going to put up a bit of a fight because they're not going to want to flex easily. But if you fold those down, because the top of this area is angled, it will make your life a lot easier. So we're just going to fold these wires back in such a way that it does not pinch against anything. Try and get the wires to lay in a nice smooth arc. So now the cover is back in place. With the cover back in place, we're going to go ahead and start these screws. And don't worry if it does not go smoothly the first time. By the third or fourth attempt to get this cover on, you will have figured out the best path to lay all the wires into to get everything smooth. It's not a big deal if it doesn't fit the first time. Don't force it. Just find a nice smooth path. Now that the wires are in place perfectly, the panel screws on nicely. Let's go ahead and take a break. Okay, once you've got all this nicely in place, remember you still have the bottom screw holding it on so that everything is latched. Come around to this side, and this is going to be largely determined by how the wiring wound up laying behind this panel. But I now have a loop that comes out and down. So because of the way mine wound up, I can simply press the voltage regulator against the Velcro and lock it in here. If I wanted to, I could raise it up some also. I'm just going to slide a screwdriver in here to separate this Velcro. But you could raise it up to this level if you wanted. Either way it would work fine. But at any rate, take the antenna and simply feed the antenna through the handle. And that's just temporary for now. The only reason I'm doing that is it's as good a place as any to put it. I'm going to route the antenna wire just under the main harness. Then I'm going to get the fuel tank support bracket that I spoke of earlier and one of the mounting screws. The top snaps into place. Make sure that this tab from the fuel tank goes into the slot on the mounting bracket and just push it in from the other side. Then the bottom here, make sure it lines up correctly with the bolt, and then we'll go ahead and put that screw in. Okay. So now the fuel tank is held in the position that it's going to go ultimately. Take the antenna. Now what I'm going to do is feed the antenna through behind the fuel tank and pull it out right here in front of the airbox. Come around the front, or excuse me, the open side. And what we want to do is make sure that the antenna wire does not in any way, shape, or form come into conflict with the recoil start mechanism. So now I've got the antenna wire above the two fuel hoses. What this will do is make sure that the antenna doesn't get anywhere near the recoil rope either, because ultimately we're just going to route the antenna around and just zip tie the antenna to the breather hose. With the antenna in this position, it'll give you plenty of range. If you did need, like say 400 feet of range, then your best approach would be to glue a washer or some kind of a metal tab to the top of the generator so that the magnetic mount for the antenna can stick to it, so that while you're operating it, you would have the antenna mounted up on top. I'm simply going to place the antenna right down here and zip tie the end of it to the breather hose. And that way the antenna will be concealed inside the rest of the generator housing. The rest of the wire is in a nice little neat bundle, and it'll just lay right in here. Now, as you remember earlier, were two sets of wires. Make sure that they don't go anywhere near the recoil rope. These are routed through, and they come through below the recoil housing. So the two that are separate are for the battery. The two with these plugs are the kill circuit. And you'll notice right back here there are two plugs. This one is the kill circuit, and you'll notice that the wires for it go to the kill switch, which is a micro switch tied into the fuel selector valve. But at any rate, it's the only two-wire connector down here. So you'll unplug the stock two-wire connector and just take these wires and route them out of the way so you can see better. Take the stock wire, plug it into one half of this harness, take the other half of this harness and plug it into the other side of the stock harness. And these tuck right back down where you retrieved them from in the first place. So when it's all in there, make sure that this wire goes down below the recoil mechanism here so that it does not come into contact with the rope for the recoil starter. because that rope will chew right through that insulation. I'm going to push it down there to make sure it is way away. It's further away than any of the stock wires. But the stock wires are safe, according to Honda, then our wires are safe. Now we have the battery. The battery is quite simple. You can't plug it in backwards, as you'll notice. So we're going to plug in the negative wire. Almost can't plug it together correctly. There it goes. Tight connector. You'll see that the battery wires, one of them is solid black, the other is black with a white tracer. The solid black goes into the solid black on the generator. The black with the white tracer is the positive battery terminal. The red plugs into it. I'm expecting a service life of about a year or so on these batteries. It may turn out to be far longer because I've got the voltage regulator dialed down to 11.4 volts. Because like I say, this battery only has to power it up for about 5 seconds. When you get ready to put the panel door on, you'll lay the battery in here and it'll slide down right by the oil fill cap. I'm going to leave it out here for now while we put the rest of the housing together. And it's probably a good place to take a break. Okay, the next step is going to be to put the cabinet back in place. So we'll take the cabinet, the 2 long 6mm bolts, and the 2 6mm screws with no shoulder. Now because we have the screw in this hole down here, it's going to make it just slightly trickier to put this cabinet on, but it's the way I choose to do it. If you would prefer to take that screw out, then by all means, whatever you need to do. Make sure and put this tab inside the front cover. Check for your height. Okay. Okay, this bolt has the relay in the way. So we're going to pull the cover off. This is the relay for the outlet control. So we need to make sure and tuck that relay forward so it does not get in the way. Because the bottom bolt goes right through this grommet. So we've just got the relay tucked forward out of the way. So now we get to do it again. Make sure that this tab on the side cover goes inside the front. sure that the back, there's a little notch that the black base plate goes into on the red cover. And make sure it's in the same on both sides. As long as that's in place correctly, go ahead and snug the bottom two bolts down. Then take the top two screws that go into the handle. Put those in place. And now remember this cover from this side. This cover has to go in before the front. So we're going to put it down low, and then it slides straight up into place. And now the front housing will slide back. Careful not to pinch the grommet around the fuel cap. I put the other lower bolt in place first. Then rock the front cover back against the main housing. So now your front housing and your main housing are together. The rear housing is the easy part. It just slides on and it goes on straight. There's no crazy alignment pins or anything else. Okay, before I put the end cover on, I wanted to cover something really quickly. This battery has two leads coming out of it. You've got one black wire and one red wire. My kit has one black wire and one red wire. The red wire is positive, the black wire is ground. I'm not sure why, but same manufacturer, same part number and everything else, has two different wiring pigtails. I don't know if they're upgrading their inventory or what. But on this one, the solid black wire is ground, and the black with a white tracer is positive. Not sure why they did that. But at any rate, so let's go ahead and put the battery in it again. And this time it'll be black to black and red to red. So at any rate, the batteries that I use are a PS1208, which is a 12 volt, 0.8 amp hour charge rate. I'm expecting a battery life of approximately a year. It may wind up being longer than a year or shorter than a year, or whatever. When you put the batteries in, it's not exactly critical. You can simply lay them in here if you want and pull them out when you get ready to do an oil change. It's just that if you lay them in there, the vibration will allow them to make a buzzing sound, and that's kind of distracting, especially when you got such a quiet generator, to have a buzzing sound going. What I'm going to do is wrap a zip tie around both of the hoses and the wiring harness and just loosely attach the battery in place. Not real tight or anything like that, just enough to hold it in place. And then out the wiring down here. And I'm going to clip the tail end off of the tie wrap. And now we'll go ahead and put the side cover on. Then we'll get ready to put this outside and start it up. Let me go get a lamp that I can plug into the outlet. Okay, to start the generator, first thing is go ahead and turn the radio switch to the on position. And the generator will run with the radio in the off position, so I'll go ahead and just start it that way. We got the radio off. This is the kill switch for the generator stock. Make sure that that switch is in the on position. Go ahead and choke the generator, which is right here. That would be the open choke. Go ahead and make sure we're ready. Fingers clear. So the light is on because the outlet is powered up. To put it into remote, just turn the radio switch to the on position. If you want to put it into economy mode, you put button number 3. Now it's in economy mode. If you wanted to shut off the outlet, button number 4. Turn the outlet back on again, button number 4 again. Or to put it in economy mode, button number 3. Or excuse me, take it out of economy mode would be button number 3. Or if you wanted to shut the generator off, you push button number 2. Now, if for some reason you started it and left the radio in the off position, it will still work for everything except shutting the generator off. And here's the reason. The 12-volt coil is producing power going through the voltage regulator and to the radio. So it's powering up the radio so that if you hit economy mode, it'll toggle in and out of economy mode. If you hit the outlet, it'll turn the outlet on and off. But if you press the kill button, the engine RPMs will drop to the point of almost killing. As soon as the RPMs are low enough that the 12-volt coil does not produce voltage, it stops sending voltage to the radio shuts off, which overrides the kill command, and it comes back on again and tries to run. Then as soon as the 12-volt coil is powering the radio up, the radio tries to shut it off and so on. So if you do get that scenario, and I'll demonstrate it real quickly, it is either because you have left the switch in the off position and the radio is simply not connected to the battery, or you have left the switch in the on position for several days and killed the battery. If you have accidentally left the switch in the off position, flipping the switch on cures it. If you've accidentally left the switch in the on position for several days and killed the battery, let the generator run for a couple of hours to charge the battery back up again, and you're good to go. But I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate it with the radio shut off now, and you'll see that it does everything fine except for it won't shut the generator down. So we've got the outlet in the on position. We'd like to shut it off. That's button number 4. It's in full throttle mode, so we'd like to put it in eco mode. That's button number 3. So you can see that the radio responds to those commands fine. But now if we go to shut it off, let me go ahead and turn these on. Button number 2. Turn the radio to the on position and hit button number 2, and the generator goes ahead and shuts off. And that should just about do it. Okay, I've done a couple things here real quick. Number 1, I've switched the batteries out and put a completely dead battery in it. So now when I flip the, you don't hear the relay for the outlet clicking. Even though the battery is in the on position, this battery is totally dead. And you'll see that a completely dead battery will function the same way as if the radio switch was in the off position. The next thing is, I took it off of the cart. I wanted to demonstrate the fact that I heard a rattling sound when I listened to the video. And I wanted to demonstrate that the rattling sound was caused by the cart, not by the generator. So let's go ahead and start it up again. Push button number 3. Okay, so now it's running in economy mode. Push button number 4 shuts the light off. But now, even with the switch in the on position with a totally dead battery, when I push button number 2, it acts exactly like it had the radio in the off position. It'll throttle way down and then rev up and throttle way down. The procedure at this point is just leave the generator running for about an hour and it'll charge the battery back up. So I just wanted to point out those two things. That'll work.